So, hello. Thank you for joining us here at our replicating critical climate data capstone of the track that's been kind of going on all week. Oh, maybe we'll turn video on. Like everyone else, still getting used to PCs. So, we have a Miro board, which is where this is being served from, and really intending for this to be an interactive session with trying to collect all the information and the notes on the Miro board. So link is here. There's a QR code. I think everyone has enough computing power to use a Miro board. If not, you can share with a friend. So the agenda here is really to try to collect what we've learned this week about the current situation. There is a kind of a workshop technique of force field analysis, where you look at what are the forces that are driving us away from our goal, what are the forces that are pulling us towards our goal, and look at how we can, amplify the ones that we like and diminish the ones that are getting in the way. And then we'll do a little bit of brainstorming around what sort of next steps there might be. And, I think exercises like this, it's important to check in with how are you feeling now after doing this? So we'll have a little bit of that too. So expectations for this discussion, we need to be sure that we're respectful to each other, be open-minded. There's a lot of different ideas, a lot of assumptions that we've had are being broken as we speak. So now is a good time to be open to what is possible. I'd like for this to be a frank discussion. And so I can't remember if it's in our code of conduct or someone on Tuesday had mentioned, talk about ideas that you hear here, but don't attribute them to people because they might need to protect that. And in general, if the folks online or even people here, because it will be a collaborative session, you might want to log into Zoom here and turn your camera on just so you can all wave and be friendly with each other. So let's. So we have a Miro board. I think it's. Come on. Here we go. That we're all going to be joining into. So what I've tried to do over the week is come back here. I know you're over there. Sneak up on it. There we go. What I've tried to do during the week is attend as many of the sessions as I could, take notes, try to just see what are the big issues. And so, we can take a look at this. And I think it was hard this week to be everywhere. There was so much going on. And so I would love for people to grab a sticky note or text or anything to add what your experience was. So we're trying to just collect what do we know now after the end of this week. And so I got quite a bit out of this document that was shared in Slack, America's Data Future Towards a Roadmap for Action. And so I went through it, and there were some interesting points that were in there. Like activating philanthropy. We're definitely going to be looking for more interactions with philanthropic organizations, foster collaborations with nonprofits. Definitely a lot of interesting talk about prioritizing the most valuable data. Engaging with the public, I thought was very interesting about how do we make sure that the public is aware of what's going on and what's at risk of being lost. Alliances, which I think is something that we're very lucky here at ESIP that there's a lot of possibility for that. Legal protections, that we know that there are certainly laws being broken right now. So what do we do to try to take action on that? And then breaking down the federal and state information silos. And I thought it was very interesting in one session where we were really thinking about, are there ways that we can integrate data that the state is already collecting and try to recreate kind of some of these federal processes? So did anyone else make it through this PDF? it was a pretty good introduction for me. Let's see what other things I got from some of the other talks was copyrights, making sure that you actually can transfer the data, keeping it fair. Don't break DOIs. That was, I think, Steve Diggs' biggest suggestion and admonition. One thing I thought was interesting was that Zenodo, which if we're moving to general purpose repositories, which I've been hearing bits and pieces of, is based on an open source framework. And so Steve Diggs mentioned that there were some features in Zenodo that aren't quite there that we really need for our community. And so I haven't looked at the software to see how easy it is to become a developer of this platform, what it's written in. But it seems like it'd be very interesting for ESIP to collect issues that are relevant to our community and our needs and encourage people to pick them up, see if we can find ways to build some of those, implement some of those features and make contributions. Let's see, what else did I get here? There's two big sites out there that are very important for us. There's the Data Rescue Project and the Public Environmental Data Partners. And so they have a Airtable that is shared to try and keep track of all these efforts. And then the only thing I got here was there was the Challenges and Risks Miro board that one of our partner talks did, which seems to be quite full of information.
Yeah, it's gonna take some time for us to decode and organize that one.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of material there.
Mm-hmm. So, oh, and then I just wanted to put, come back here, come back. I put on here some costs for storage, just because that's going to be an interesting question. There's a lot of different options for types of storage, and so getting some pricing. So that was kind of the homework I did before this. What else have people learned this week? What are some of your takeaways or?
I get to the copyrights question, the licenses dimension as well, as there's actually a really interesting expanded discussion in Slack.
Mhm.
As the copyright question came up, and Matt Jones in particular added some additional useful points about the connectivity between copyright or the relationship between copyright and licenses.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and it just occurs to me,
Ah, yes.
you're speaking.
So.
Yeah, also adding to this, to the copyright comments, the necessity of clear and open licenses as a complement to copyright, as at least here in the US, copyright for some materials automatically applied and limited
Mhm.
and limiting in the absence of explicit licenses that define rights beyond the extreme limitations of copyright alone.
Mm-hmm. What else? Yeah, so what else is people? I mean, there was so much discussed this week. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Joseph, since you were in most of the most of the meetings.
I mean, I sort of feel like I said as much as I could this week about this topic. I know there are other sessions that occurred during the week that weren't on the spreadsheet that I put together that also talked about data resiliency in different ways. I'd love to hear from people that attended those sessions to see like what ideas they had. Some people have been calling it data rescue, but I think we're trying to move, at least some of us are trying to move away from data rescue to data resiliency because we're still here. We're still standing. And trying to be a little more positive about it. We're not, there are things we can do rather than waiting for the axe to fall on us. And whether that is being stronger together, not just siloed off in our own institutions, but connecting nationally or better connections internationally. I know there's been an outpouring of support of other nations clandestinely or very straightforwardly asking, what can we do to help support your what you do, especially for the big observing networks. If, say, all climate data out of the US was suddenly cut off and couldn't leave to go to Europe for ECMWF, that's a giant portion of the world that we no longer have observations over. Forecasting quality is going to go down by quite a bit. So we have to do more together with less resources, as sort of is always the case. We can try to find the silver linings in all of this. It is going to force us to be more adaptable, to work with each other more, rather than say, well, you know, we're kind of comfortable with the situation we have. We can get by with 3 programmers instead of 4 programmers. No, that there may be drastic cuts. And so we are going to have to really rethink about the situation. And I think that may be the biggest point that I've been trying to get across this week, that we really do have to rethink about how we are living in this brave new world. And the old rules do not necessarily apply. We may never go back to that situation where we all have stable science funding. We all have stable jobs for 50, 60 years, 70, however long. And so if it means that we have to really focus in on what our strengths are, I mean, you know, someone like Google can deploy a team of 100 software engineers overnight if they really want to. We can reframe FAIR as being AI ready, especially the interoperable and reusable part, because they want to suck up the data to use it to train their models. And we've heard and we know that, you know, the IR part of FAIR has been not as far along as, say, findable and accessible. So if we can successfully reframe the conversation to being AI ready, maybe that gets Google or Amazon or Meta or whoever to suddenly say, we are willing to throw tens or hundreds of millions of dollars at this. We want to privatize data management. As scary as that sounds to me, but they can make a business case out of it. And we've also heard about people saying, you know, people are free riding on the government system and they want them to pay their fair share of money for the resources that they've been using. I mean, I think all of us in this room can certainly say that we've had colleagues that have left for greener pastures. They get paid 2, 3, 4 times more than what they make at their institutions, national labs. They can still publish papers. And after they pay for their house with cash and they're financially set, they can go back to whatever lab they want to go to. So, I mean, there are truths out there that we may not want to look at or consider right now, but we have to do the hard things and look at them and try to scientifically, objectively analyze them as best we can, because that's what we are, scientists. That's what we care about.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks. It's Matt Marinick from NCAR. I guess my first question is, where are all these high-paying jobs people keep talking about? I guess I'm not seeing these listings. So a couple of follow-ons to Joseph. I think, I guess one takeaway I have, which maybe is not new, but is definitely reinforced by this ESIB meeting, is the need to be really clear on kind of the goals of any activities in this area. And as Joseph said, data rescue is not the same thing as data resiliency, which is not the same thing as data replication. These have implications or not even implications for different types of activities and different, things that you're focusing on. A couple other distinctions are, the sort of emergency situation versus sort of a semi-stable situation where you want to prepare or prevent an emergency situation. There's something else I was going to say. Oh, I guess the other part I would add, and maybe this just because I'm not as much of a technical person, but I see a lot of these challenges being more organizational and institutional in nature, and not that they aren't technical, but we kind of know how to do things technically. But what's happening now is destruction of institutions as much as destruction of data. There's some data sets that have still been available, but there's nobody to support them, right? Or there's no funding that's kind of standing those servers up anymore, so they could go away at some point. So it's not a technological attack, it's an institutional attack. And I think that needs to be part of the conversation, is how can we be building institutions to support these data as much as technologies. It's notable that the storage options has many lines filled out, and the funding box has nothing filled out, right? That's kind of what I'm pointing to, is in part as well. So I don't have any solutions to that. That's just kind of some observations.
Yeah, I wanted to add something about in regards to the funding, and like a comment Joseph made about privatization that was kind of scary. And something that's come up this week that I wanted to throw in is the like open source software. They kind of made progress in getting private funding to pay for open source development, but without being like beholden to the companies paying. And maybe something like that could be promising for science.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There's that foundation that supports a lot of scientific software. The names.
I don't.
NumFocus. That would be the.
Okay, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
not.
No, but thanks for. Yeah, thanks for reminding us of that. I just couldn't remember the name of the best example.
And even yeah, and even maybe drawing an ESIP as a platform where some kind of model like that could happen.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Matthew Biddle online. I just wanted to second that. I believe that was Carolina there. I think there's other open source models that went down that path, and then the funding started directing where that project's going to go. So it's a double-edged sword. I think it's happened both ways. So I just put that caveat out there.
One thing. So yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
At the same time, I know, I understand. There is also some value in value, like that's a loaded word, right? Like, yeah, like where people want to see things go and having direction, and something that does, have some sort of perceived value for people outside the community.
It's just ideas that don't have financial backing. So one of my other projects I work on is the Large Hadron Collider. And it's so interesting, as I've been sitting here this week, I've really thought like, what's so interesting about CERN is that really there's no government that could make the data disappear like this has happened. It is a collaboration, like a global collaboration. And I think it's kind of made me realize like, why isn't this more of a global collaboration? Is there like a earth science CERN? No.
I think there are different international organizations that provide more narrow coordination, but I think it may be more coordination than resources, which I think is a big difference
CERN has an
between.
awesome budget.
Yes, exactly. I think of GEO, the Group on Earth Observations, that has broad international participation with continued push to increase engagement and build capacity outside of sort of the European and broader initial sort of centers of leadership in that. But that's a fair amount of coordination. It's not a highly resourced operation. WMO is an example of for global coordination and some lightly resourced international data activities. But yeah, that we don't have something that is funded like a CERN that provides an operational foundation for that is more resilient based on that diversified foundation. And yeah, I think to Joseph's point, I think, we have enjoyed a degree of stability and support that has not encouraged us in the US to build those relationships and establish or participate in the development of those sorts of more collaborative shared capabilities. And I think we're at a reckoning point now where we absolutely have been encouraged to do that because we've seen the potential risks of the one basket our eggs have been comfortably laying for a century now, really. Coming up on a century in terms of, we look at the Vannevar Bush National Science Foundation, federally funded, centrally coordinated research enterprise that has grown in the US. That's been a strong model, but it's also a risky model. So yeah, we're in a new era where we need to build the relationships, but we're also, unfortunately, there's a political dimension that is making it difficult to develop those just because of more national animosities that work against productively building those relationships. That's another dimension I guess we need to contend with.
So that's a great segue to force field analysis. So let's move on there unless anyone has anything that they're desperate to add to the story so far.
I guess there you want to.
Yeah.
Sort of along the line of the privatization or the opportunities to reconsider who the players are in our space and who is doing what and how things are funded. Funding is absolutely necessary because everything we do costs money. Where that funding and effort comes from is necessarily going to be shifting. And the models that we've operated on where we have had subsidized data as an example that can feed into private sector benefits, public benefits, research benefits, that with changes in taxing regimes and willingness to provide public funding. That's changing. So looking at, fee for service, fee for data models that we have been able to avoid thus far, that may be a necessary element. That because if if the Googles and Amazons and Apples and others of the world are value these data, but the infrastructure is no longer being centrally supported to provide continuity of access and discovery and use, then they may not be paying the corporate taxes, but there may actually be other models that have to be put in place to capture cover the actual costs of maintaining the systems that provide that access, which then brings up the other key distinguishing characteristic that I think we need to be thinking about as we triage sort of this disruption that we're going through right now, which is the separating the value of the data and the importance of the data themselves as an asset, teasing that apart from the services and benefits derived from those data, and figuring out how we may be able to support and maintain those different aspects of it, because the core continuity of access, that's a foundational requirement from which the other benefits flow. But given the resourcing models we're maybe looking at, that is maybe the best place for looking at near-term international collaborations and CERN-like coordinated infrastructure and operationalization, just to keep the foundational data available, and teasing those apart from the value-added services or products or capabilities that are continuously developed and require their own care and feeding, but have their own, let's call them business models that support or wane as their value changes through time. But being able to tease those apart, because we've often sort of lumped them together as like, I have this data set and I have this stack of services built on top of it, and it's treated as more of a vertically integrated system. And we may be at the point where we need to more explicitly try to tease those apart.
Okay, join me down here. And so the first part of this exercise would be trying to articulate what is our goal. I made up something that we couldn't complain about, fair data sets, but I think there's something better there. So maybe it's resilient data sets. So like, what is our goal of what we hope to achieve? And then we're going to be looking at things that we can do that are making that more possible and things that are making that harder.
I think what we're all really trying to do is to preserve access to the information in these data sets that we know are critical, whether for life or property or whatever else. Fair data sets is a way to get there, but if we are looking at the underlying picture, we want to know if it's going to rain tomorrow. We want to know how much it's going to rain. People don't necessarily care that the rain is being reported in a 64-bit float. and that we have 7 sig figs to it.
But I think preserving access to data is still an underlying thing. It's really access to information. Right. And there's a difference. I mean, you can have big maps of, uh, I guess I'll use a NOAA example. You know, people really might not understand what it means to have a 17-foot storm surge, but when they see a picture of the water line at the upper story window, then they get it.
Can
And so
I add a
yes,
comment?
please, yes.
So Ruth, to expand on it is, so I kind of think of it as 2 components. You need the back data to support that, and then you need the visualization, the communication piece to be able to tell the story. And so I feel like the visualization communication piece is really important, but that's something that could be separated into, I guess I'm trying to separate this into 2 different pieces. Where you have a foundational layer and then you have the other things that are built on top of it.
Yeah, this is Carl Benedict again, and I would agree completely. And I think this is where the specialization and diversification of roles, and each of us playing to our particular strengths and working with each other and supporting each other, then I think becomes a critical component where we don't need to necessarily replicate that entire stack of capabilities within our individual organization or program. If we are a key player in a part of that value chain, that is a contribution that we can efficiently and effectively make. And this is where I think, to the point that was made a moment ago, that the resilience and the preservation, those are aspects of the larger tent of FAIR. That's the the accessibility and findability. Those are characteristics of the metadata and the actually being able to get to the bits and make use of them. The interoperability gets to the capacity for us to actually be able to do what we do best as a part of that value chain, and being able to support the use of those data by others, or the products we derive from those data by others. And the reproducibility side of it is continuing to build the trusted products and contribute to that trust through the documentation. And reproducibility is sort of the broad concept for this is something that I ultimately can trust as an outcome of this sequence of activities. So the resilience is a part of it. There are a lot of parts of it, but we may be looking at a future where we may actually become more specialized in the activities that we take on. We maybe do smaller and more focused activities through collaborative work, as opposed to, we're the big center that's going to do everything. We're working as a part of a team. And yeah, exactly.
I think we're starting to get into driving forces. So it's interesting, I think, looking at the difference between preserving access to data and preserving access to information. I think no surprise when you said metadata. For me, that sort of moved it more over into the information side. Like we could take a bunch of CSV files, stick them in Google Drive with no metadata, and we don't even know what's there, but the data is there, but we know we can't do anything with it. So, and then the other thing is the people. Like if we preserve all of the data, beautiful metadata, but there's nobody working in the field anymore, then that doesn't help humanity. So I'm leaning towards preserve access to information, but
I think there's a necessary but not sufficient dimension.
I would agree that is one of the necessary but not sufficient components of what feeds into that fair data sets box. I'm inclined to continue to see the value of the fair data sets as a big
okay.
element, but focusing on what are the dimensions of that when it comes to the inputs into
Let's
that.
try our force field. So,
Yeah.
and I guess we don't need the word preserve in front of fair because fair implies preserve. There's, I guess the A means that it's preserved. You can't have fair data sets that are deleted and they're not fair anymore. Okay. So we can certainly, if you're in Miro, feel free to buzz around and do things that come to mind. Do we want to focus? Do we want to discuss? Do you want like have some quiet time for people to put things on the Miro?
Operationally in the diagram, what do the numbers mean? Is that a prioritization or is that just a labeling or?
So the numbers on the side are what is it in a vector? It's the force. So these are vectors. And so how big is this force? And so if you can find a big enough driving force, it can counteract some smaller group of resisting forces. So it's the magnitude. The magnitude, yes.
Do we have a scale? Is it 0 to 10, 0 to 100?
What do they do here? This is in the example there. It looks like it's 10, 0 to 10. So go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of one of the forces, I guess I'm curious. I will admit I haven't been super engaged in a lot of the replication rescue stuff that's been going on this time. I was more aware of what was happening in the first Trump administration. And the force I'm getting to is the public interest in this, and there's a lot of people who've put a lot of energy towards this. And in some ways that there's been less attention on it, feels like this time, but probably it's much more urgent and maybe even more stuff happening. But
yeah.
I guess there's a question for everyone else here, and I know some people have already talked about this, so you don't have to recapitulate everything, but are you feeling like there's marshaling of that force in any effective manner? I know that's part of what we're trying to get to here is, can we help with that? But like the force of the public who wants to help with this problem and recognizes that it is a problem, that some of these data might go away. Is that force being marshaled in any effective way? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I've been around the edges of the PEDP efforts for a little bit, and I would say that they've got a lot of volunteers, most of whom lacked expertise and technical, know how to really dig into the important data sets. Well, I put that in quotes, but some of the, there's low-hanging fruit that's been tackled, but generally speaking, the interest outweighs the actually ability to tackle some of the data preservation and rescue.
Matthew?
Yeah, I was just gonna bring up a use case. There was, it was Coastwatch. I think there were a couple nodes that were slated to go down, and there was a lot of people that screamed, "Don't do that," and they didn't do it. So, and I don't know if that was from the public or if that was internal forcing that made that not happen. But there was pushback on, we're gonna pull this thing down, and people said no, and they didn't do it. So I think there is some support and there's mechanisms, but I don't know what those might be.
And we'll go ahead, Joseph, but what we're going to do after this is look at what can we do to magnify or diminish each of these things. But
I think as far as expert response, it's been a lot more, well, maybe not a lot more, but it's been more clandestine because the people that were paying attention and started worrying about this immediately, maybe whether they'd been through it before with the first round or even previous, they read the Project 2025 report and like they knew it was laid out very clearly in there. And there's always that sort of cost benefit analysis of, do I try to work quietly while within the system for as long as I can, or do I start the protests loud and proud and try to get the public engaged? And so there are people that have definitely been working on this quietly behind the scenes. I was at sea for a lot of the first Trump term, so I was not as engaged that time around as this time around. And so it's hard for me to judge the difference in response, but I think before there were a lot of career bureaucrats, people that, maybe they wanted to make some changes, but they still believed in the government. They just disagreed about how the government should be run. This is not that time. And so people are now more trying to do whatever they can in whatever manner they seem best, which results in a more diffuse force going in many directions, some of them that are redundant, some of them that are pushing against each other because they're negating each other out for no real purpose, although they want to pull in the same direction. But like we've read Project 2025. Everything that they said they would try to do, they're trying to do it. Even the things that aren't passing on first go, like the budget for FY25 was more or less passed, and then they immediately went to send through a rescission bill. And for the people that believe that FY26 will be passed under the Senate or the House version, what's to say that another rescission bill won't come over immediately, or impoundment will immediately happen where the administration just refuses to send out the money. And by the time the courts say in a year or so that, no, you have to spend that money, everybody's already been gone for 2 years.
so budget cuts, definitely a restraining force. Back on this side, sounds like industry support is something that we know can be beneficial. And I guess what we've also said is international support.
Yeah, just to come back in the idea of the visualization, and one thing that I see hard basically to quantify or to see, it's like we don't communicate well what it take to produce that visualization, like how much resources, how many people, how many time, what type of like evolution, or we have the data, we have like access to a data set. I find it, I mean, I can reproduce it, but I don't know what it took people, or how much resources and like it was in the data set. And I think I don't know how to tie this information in the in the data set, but maybe this will bring more kind of value to the data set or, yeah.
So this sounds like a restraining force, that there's lack of visibility to what it takes to have what we have.
Mhm.
Like people don't even understand. Okay.
And I just added agency resistance friction.
Mhm.
Yeah, the agency resistance and friction, I think that's a little different than the budget one. The budget one is more focused on resources, where given the leadership that's been put into place, there are administrative and bureaucratic barriers that can also be there, sand that can be tossed into the gears
Mhm.
of trying to accomplish some goals.
Yes. As you're saying that, I want to point out, you're retired, so you can say whatever you want to. I've also intentionally we're not recording this session, so feel free to.
Back to the issue of public support, really, there's a couple of different directions of that. I mean, if you think of organizations like 350.org and any of the climate related, advocacy things, there's a fair amount of effort there trying to push Congress in particular, or for example, the head of the EPA, et cetera, to do things that are against what's in Project 2025. So there's sort of a push to not do some of these harmful things. So that's one level of public engagement, because they do get actual fair amount of leverage on those things.
Mhm.
And if you think about organizations like earthjustice.org, I mean, there's a heck of a lot of lawsuits going on right at the moment, and some of them are being won.
Mhm.
So, that's at least 3 different kinds of pushes from the public. I mean, there's the actual people saving bits, maybe perhaps not as effectively as they could be.
Mhm.
People pushing their legislatures to do the right thing, and people supporting the legal efforts to change things. So that's kind of 3 different forces there.
Thank you for mentioning that. Do we want to keep that under public support, or could it be its own driving force? Advocacy orgs.
As long as it's captured somewhere.
Yeah. There's certainly some good things about 2025, and part of it is like the technology and like storage. I think there was the source.coop talk yesterday. They were really emphasizing like object stores change things, and so mere mortals can get their hands on enough storage space, and so that does make some of like sanctuaries certainly more possible.
Yeah, there is just I'm thinking of the risk that we are taking also now by trying to be resilient, is like accepting certain kind of deals that may be harmful in the future just because of the urgency to
Mhm.
basically save things. So I think yes, there is disruption, but there is also a certain level of how to call it, like care, or we should be careful kind of what we're doing in terms of like giving power basically if we push everything to private sector, for example, at certain point, very critical data, what will happen after? We're gonna lose so much kind of power to certain, and we're just shifting kind of power to another level of disruption maybe.
So I think that's a restraining force in order, for us to have these fair data sets, conflict of interest with who we might be turning to. There might be conflicts down the road, like in terms of corporate partners who don't want the data accessible. Yeah, thank you. Whoever's
So for private industry, there are a wide number of industries and they want the data for different purposes. I've heard some examples of the insurance and reinsurance agency that do not want to collect their own data. They don't want to hold their own data. They want it to come from a trusted source and not have the appearance of bias that might make people go away from them. For other industries, the tech industry, AI, like they want as much of the data as possible. They might be willing to say, okay, we will hold the data for you, but they also don't want to pay the supposedly sky high wages they pay for curators to get the well curated data that the well labeled data that they need to make their models and other sources inputs into their AI models better. And we can look at, say, maybe power utilities or water utilities, like they are willing to install sensors and do the observations and do it because they need it to optimize their own outputs. So just trying to be realizing it's not homogeneous, and although the initial consortium is the national government that takes taxes from everyone and then tries to allocate the money fairly according to a process. If we break it down into a private or what is it? Not a civilian, but a citizen private cooperation, making sure that we have a breadth of partners at the table where they all have different use cases for it, different wants and needs, but it's all being fed by the same thing at the end, the access to the information, the access to the data. And so that allows us to balance out those forces and not allow any one of them to overwhelm everyone else at the table.
So I think I would. One way I would summarize that is that there's a force that there is many people need for this information to be independent and trustworthy, and having it in the hands of any one corporation will reduce that. So that's the benefit of having it fair.
Yeah, I think I just add to that. You said, Ben, there's lots of organizations that need this information. Well, this information is a huge amount of diverse things. And, there's absolutely organizations in the private sector and other sectors that use government data or data from government funded entities, but not all, right? Not all of the data, like the piddly little data set that I created myself, which I've done some of these and put them in these repositories, like that's not making Google any money, right? So there's no reason for them to have anything to do with that. And the vast majority of probably our data sets in terms of numbers of data sets are of that type. The ones they want are the ones that are uniform, well formatted, high volume, broad coverage. They can be pulled into models or sucked into AI tools consistently, et cetera. So I think that's always the danger of going that way, is that the monetary value, so to speak, of our resources are highly variable, and the incentives for anybody who's not doing this in a public good sense to track these or keep track of them, spend money on them, is highly variable also. So I think that's a constraint, right? Is that what we have is across our sector of the ESIP as a sector is very heterogeneous in its potential monetary value. Right, some of it could be monetized. Carl mentioned this, like providing a fee for service, fee for data. Some of that could, and there are other organizations in Europe and elsewhere that have and traditionally had fee for service, fee for data models. I think that's changed a little bit, but not every data set could be sold, right? Let's put it straight. So I think that's why the government sector has dominated this, because it's a public good, right? There's public benefit and scientific benefit. It's building part of the scientific record, which, although part of that has also been monetized, is also not a good thing. So again, maybe I'm too much of an academic throwing out problems, not solutions, but yeah.
That's this point. We're at that point in the talk, just throw out problems. So I was going to make that both on the driving force is some data has monetary value. And so that's great. That data has a lot of friends. Some data has no monetary value. And from our enterprise's point of view, they're all valid. But how do we make sure that we don't just have the valuable stuff?
Sorry.
Well, and I think we've seen in the recent developments, a need, because I think the point of trusted data is a critical one, but we have historically treated trusted data as where I download the data from, the physical hosted systems, and the organization that is maintaining that system. And that is an intentionally single organization, not organizations. The trusted data are absolutely essential in terms of having mechanisms for being able to know that the data that you're getting are the data that you expect to be getting in terms of, provenance, origin, documented quality and characteristics. But this may be another instance where we need to possibly tease apart that historic reliance on a single point of access as our equivalent or proxy for trusted data, and giving more attention to other mechanisms for being able to track or demonstrate trust or authenticity of data sets that may actually be acquired through a distributed system in which we are not reliant on what is potentially a single point of failure for discovery and access. So that, there are copies in S3 buckets and in Google Cloud and in NASA maintained preservation systems. And there are ways to ensure that wherever the physical bits are coming from, you have a level of assurance that they are the bits that you expect to be getting. And if one of those suffers a short or long-term outage, those bits remain available and they remain trusted.
Yeah.
And as new distribution points come online, there are then mechanisms for being able to maintain confidence that the new copies that are available are consistent with the existing copies that are available. And teasing that apart is probably also something that we're needing to give more attention to. Because otherwise we maintain this single point of failure risk, which is an increasingly visible one.
So let's review. So if our goal is fair data sets forever, what are the challenges? So budget cuts, agency resistance and friction, lack of visibility, understanding what it takes to actually maintain these, political animosity, conflict of interest with corporate partners, the data that has no friends, monetary friends, and as we distribute the data into general repos, how do we trust it? Does that sound like what we're up against as a summary?
There is also a rising point of like the environmental impact actually of this data, where we store it, like how like the material we're using to store this data, like the physical environmental impact of it. Like we use so many like I don't know, we mine things to. I know it's sound minor maybe from our point of view, but it's like with an increasing need of it's like in terms of environmental sustainability, there's a point where people are telling us that we are like by trying to save the environment, we're like making it worse.
Yes, I was at a workshop where we were talking about running all these models to save the cryosphere. Like, sure. And I guess as we side effect of replication is that you're just increasing the environmental impact of our data. So challenge, like, if we can make all these go away, would we have fair data sets forever? Sure. Okay. So the good news, we have public support, we have industry support, international support. We're increasing our efficiency, consolidating resources. Someone put that up there. I don't know if, what does that mean? Consolidating resources.
There's been a lot of talk, I mean, kind of, I think initiated by Joseph's presentation on generalist repositories about, yeah, like how we could,
Yes.
yeah, I don't know how.
Increased,
Yeah.
increased efficiency.
Yeah.
Right?
Where do NGOs fit in? Is that?
As we have government and private sector
Is it, is it-
or institutional support, I'm just wondering if it's industry / NGO, if we want to have a bigger bucket or if we want to break them out separately, because I think NGOs, nonprofits are another resource that I think we have undervalued in some respects.
Mhm. Yes. And I think it's different. There's advocacy, which is like, 360.org or other things, but this is probably different because it's, Ruth was like talking about advocacy in terms of marshaling like legal resources or citizens to stand up, and NGOs might actually support this data.
Yeah, an example of that is the IPCC, the World Meteorological Organization, which maybe is on there somewhere. But they support the World Data Center for the IPCC reports. So that was sort of the closest thing to the CERN for science or climate. And you asked that earlier. I don't exactly know how that works, and it's very focused, right? And I think that's a point that kind of generally here is that CERN is very focused. It's not all physics,
No.
right? It's data that comes from its colliders, and they've got to focus. And same thing with IPCC and that whole thing. So doing something broadly, not that it can't be done, but the kind of it tends to be the more focused you can get. As I sort of said earlier, that if you can define the problem, you can marshal people to get to that problem. If your goal is to support earth science, well, who does that include? Is that me? I'm not sure.
Advocacy, commoditized storage, reducing those costs, legal challenges, the desire to keep data independent and trustworthy, the monetary value of some data, and NGO support. So we've got a lot on our side. And I think, I don't want to do the whole vector analysis. I think that starts getting too, we only have, but
I added another red
Oh.
square.
thank you.
And I just called it inertia because you said, yeah, if all these things went away, would we have perfect data sets? And like, no, there's still, yeah, something to overcome with actually, harnessing the will to do all the work. Yeah.
And yeah, actually that, and then that reminds me, it's similar, but it's also, so many people have been talking about despair is not something we can afford. And so sinking into despair is definitely something that we're fighting against. Okay. So now we've done some of this, but let's ignore the participant thing. Just go ahead and grab sticky notes down here. I don't think we need to keep track of participants or anything like that. But so we've talked about some of these things. I'm trying to now remember some of them about, okay, how do we activate, amplify those forces that are going in our favor? How do we reduce and diminish some of those forces that are working against us? And so now's my time. I kept engineering ideas to Carl's problem about trusted data. Is there a place for like a hash in a DOI? Is that just metadata that you could associate with a DOI?
There could be an extension.
There could be, because there are additional elements that can be included in a DOI as an extension to the core pointer that the DOI goes to. I'm not sure if it's been a while since I've generated them, but
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if there isn't a place to
Somehow.
capture that in the metadata internal to the DOI, but that certainly could be potentially tacked onto the DOI itself. But, that's why, as we saw in one of the posters earlier, the hash identifier model of the interplanetary file system is an interesting
Right.
way to make those hashes true first-class citizens in terms of identifiers.
Yes. You're okay. So yeah, so go back through the list and think about your favorite positive forces or your boo hiss restraining force, and what can you do? Well, or just throw out some ideas about how we can amplify or diminish.
Well, I've been thinking about the economics thing since I brought that up early. And I kind of want to go back on what I said. Like, what if, and this is a what if, so I don't know how practical this is or legal even how it would work, but what if the organizations, again, in this sector, ESIP, which is generally nonprofit and funded by the government, were to somehow be able to charge for-profit organizations for access to data? And it could be something like 10 cents per megabyte downloaded, right? You could come up with some arbitrary scheme. Could that be a way to get some, things like that? And there are lots of examples of this, like, Esri software and others, maybe not Esri, but many softwares, like you have tiers of purchasing, right? Like students are free and maybe it's got some limitations to it, but then there's, individual tier, professional tier, organizational tier. I don't like this idea because I'm a proponent of open data, but maybe if all of our funding gets cut, then we have to do that, right? We say there's cost tiers and there's a free level, and somehow that's all distinguished in a realistic way. But I don't know. Why not make Google pay for our data?
With Susan leaving as executive director and the upcoming new executive director search, and with the business meeting in just an hour or so, these are all good ideas that should be explored. Like if if the federal government stops directly funding us, but ESIP turns into some sort of non-profit contractor, because contractors seem to be the way to go for the government nowadays. And we just shovel all our data into ESIP, and I don't even know what it would look like or how it'd work.
Mhm.
Need to think about it more, but it could be an idea that has legs. I haven't thought about it until you brought it up, so.
It sounds a bit like, isn't there like Patreon? Isn't there like a web service that you can, if you're, so have a Patreon repo for earth science data so that, because we can't charge for the NASA data because it's not ours, but people who are producing data can say, this is an awful idea. Instead of putting it into a Zenodo, you put it into the Patreon repo. Terrible idea. I'm not even gonna write it down, but please rescue me.
Oh, so since this is not being recorded, I want to bring up something that's maybe dicey. I wonder if, I think sometimes in these efforts, there is an idea of like, oh, let's, which data sets need to be prioritized in order of importance. Yeah, and then maybe there are some data sets of which are more, about monitoring and which maybe do belong in like a public space, and others that do not. And even like getting ahead of the curve and actually identifying those from within the community might, might be painful, but maybe helpful too, to make sure that those priorities remain.
Just to go back to the ESIP search for an executive director, maybe the skills that we should be looking for in the next ESIP executive director is not how much money can you raise from government, private foundations, nonprofits, but how good are you at monetizing what we have, our skill sets and the data that we manage, and our ability to generate new standards. I mean, who is it? The Fraunhofer Corporation or Consortium owns the JPEG standard. They license that out, and anyone that wants to decode a JPEG or lots of other file formats, they have to pay a royalty fee to use their software.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on the impact of monetizing, how this will impact the locally
Mhm.
innovating and creating things that are not like, if you will be producing this will reduce, I think, creativity maybe. I don't know.
The counterpoint that's been seen recently in the open source software community is that there have been a number of software projects that were previously free and open source, and their developers, maintainers are struggling to get along financially, and they see Amazon et al. Using it, deploying it on AWS. And so they try to go in and put in they changed the license. So you can use the older versions of the software still unencumbered, but the newer versions of the software, they say if you have revenue generation of $10 billion or more, you need to pay this nominal fee. And there are lots of cases, Redis Labs, HashiCorp, and the wider open source community, public, even companies straight up revolted. They forked it immediately and they started developing on those forks. And some of those companies have turned back, even though the only thing they were trying to do is feed themselves. And they see AWS, GCP, Azure making lots and lots of profit off of this. But the other people are saying this is ideologically against what we believe, and we don't want to get hit by a license change in the future. And then be forced into the same position as these companies have been forced into. Or in some cases, Amazon goes, okay, so you change the license, so we're going to fork it from here and we're going to use our own implementation. And then 9 to 12 months later, Amazon has won with their fork and nobody's using the original license changed format implementation, but rather everyone's using Amazon's implementation because everybody's on AWS.
I mean, and one, so thinking about public support, so those examples are at least perceived as a corporation trying to enclose like what used to be a common, and that makes people upset. And so then it would be a matter of building public support that this is a public good that's just trying to exist in a new reality. But yeah, data, information wants to be free. That's
Yeah, maybe like I'm also like an open data advocate. Yeah, right. Like y'all are. So yeah, it does feel bad to imagine that putting the data behind a paywall. So like maybe there is some sort of middle ground where the data can still be accessible, but there's other services or whatever, or products built on top of the data, and then those can be monetized, and maybe even creating or like sort of encouraging some sort of ecosystem where people could even know how to come in and play and use the data to make their own revenue streams and actually even gain support that way.
And so back to general internet computer science history, once you put something out there publicly available, you can't control what happens to it. People can make copies of it, so we make something, we tell Amazon that they have to pay for it once, and then Google goes over and copies it from Amazon after they've downloaded it. Are we going to put DRM on all of our
I mean,
data?
You can sue. I mean,
You can sue. I am unemployed and Amazon is worth at least $1 trillion.
yes.
Um, I
Okay, that's
we can but just
let's dig ourselves out of this hole.
Do we want to consider putting something like DRM on our data that locks access?
Black. Okay. So all right, so I think a lot of these ideas are around budget cuts. It's interesting. I could imagine in terms of the agency resistance, charging for public data, which sounds gross to us, probably sounds great to the new administration. Like, oh, let's see what we can do. So that's pretty good. What about the public, NGOs, activists? Like, how do we increase the force that force of helping us out to make these data sets more available?
Yeah, going in a different direction. I think somebody mentioned this earlier, maybe Ruth, but on the idea of sort of communication and making it more clear the benefits that these data have. And I think this has already started in some cases, and I'm sure a lot of organizations are trying to do this. I know NCAR is been doing some of this, but telling stories about what these data going away might mean, worse weather forecasts, right? Worse flood forecasts. And, you can be skeptical and say that people who are in decision making and cutting these things these are irrelevant. But somebody else gave the example of sort of public outcry to help stop the elimination of something. I don't think people want worse weather forecasts. I don't think people want worse flood forecasts. I don't think people want worse health care outcomes, right? Which is happening with NIH cuts. Like, I don't think people want worse support for cancer research. I would guess that vast majority of the US would not agree with those outcomes. So how can we make those cases better? Again, I don't know the solution to this.
Yep.
But if there's something we can somehow do, like telling stories, visualizations, like making these cases, somehow getting these out more clearly, more broadly, sort of trying to push in that direction of showing the positive aspects of these, that like there's real consequences for people's lives. Worse earthquake management and prediction and notification, like that's a big problem, right? Things should not be getting worse in these regards. They should be getting
Right. So drawing those lines. How about international collaboration, or do you want to?
I'd like to comment. Just on the topic of trying to leverage the nonprofit and NGO world and their kind of coalition of eager volunteers that they may have behind them. I do feel like there's certainly like people that want to help preserve data, but they also don't always know how. And, so like there's kind of a lot of well-meaning helpfulness out there. And I think maybe one thing we can do is try to channel that and educate those people that want to help, help them actually get data sets into repositories with good metadata and make sure that it is actually useful and that it's kind of, I don't know, that it's not effort that just, I don't know, sort of distributes data in a very haphazard way, I think. So.
Yes.
Part of it is, I think we need on the communication front, maybe an expanded cohort of science communicators. See, this is where we have sort of the gap between sort of the general media, which tends to grab headlines and often provide a superficial reporting or coverage on scientific issues or topics. And we have those of us that are doing the science that are often in the way we communicate very dry and restrained and focusing on what we know and what we don't know and the uncertainty, which is also not an entirely effective public communication strategy. And it's one that has absolutely been used as a stick by those who want to argue against scientific insights, focusing on that uncertainty. I expect we would potentially benefit from a growing cohort of, let's say, more direct, more both informed, but dare I say, aggressive communicators on behalf of the science that go beyond sort of our habitual restrained communication style in the core of the scientific endeavor. We need some more informed advocates who are specifically playing that role to offset the increasingly ideological attacks on science and knowledge.
So a polite version of that is put increased capacity for communicating value to the public. Is that? All right. Want to make sure we get our last exercise. Thank you. This is, I think, a great start. I know there's a lot more that we could be doing, but I think we have some things that we could be working on. So just my last one, if you'll bear with me, is someone's my favorite part about Miro is when everything starts moving around. So come back. Here we go. So I don't know about you. This has been a pretty tough week for me being here at ESIP. It's been great to be in community, but also to really spend a whole week kind of in this what's going on. And so I think it's useful to name your feelings, and there's probably a lot of them, but you know, I'll be public with mine, but everyone can, if you would just grab. Wait, where'd it go?
While you're doing that, I'll just say I kind of feel I'm in every sector except maybe the pink. And I think maybe that's why I've been feeling a bit paralyzed, is because like
Yeah.
what to feel about all this. It's all of those things, just about. And I think coming to this meeting is sort of helped move me down in this, lower on the chart, which is good.
Mhm.
Bottom sector is better sectors,
Mhm.
because I think there is a lot of positive energy and at least recognition that there could be steps forward, even if we all recognize the challenges there and the significant resource limitations. But yeah, it's hard for me to pick one, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Okay. Just to clarify the activity, can we pick more than one? Is that-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's all we're doing. This one thing I have been thinking is that I really believe that ESIP was made for this moment, that in some ways it was like the wildest dreams of the federal government that we used to know. And that, the audacity of having the big earth science organizations be a center of mass for all of us that are working in this field to come together and think about data and collaboration. And like this, you couldn't create this overnight. And so the relationships that we have here are amazing. And we know people, we know that we can rely on each other. And so in some ways I'm optimistic because of what we have here. And so let's not forget that.
I'm not opening my computer to put a
Yeah.
little dot on there, so I'll just say that my feelings have been that at least I've burned the boats a long time ago. There's no going back. And so we just have to keep moving forward. And I recite a passage to myself about every week or so. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I'll permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it is gone, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where I look behind me, nothing is there, only I will remain. It's pretty good that I've memorized that.
That only comes with practice.
And I note that actually on my screen, I can't read any of that. So I'm just going to say it out loud. So I've been very angry and very energized. The best thing I do on a weekly basis, except this week, obviously, is I actually go out and protest. And the number of letters that I've written to everybody you can think about. I'm quite sure that my senators know exactly who I am. Ditto with my representative. Ditto with probably by now the heads of almost all the agencies. You know, uh, and I actually do think it actually makes a difference. Because I can see that some of the things that I've been protesting about have reversed themselves. And that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think one of the things that came up for me a lot just during this discussion, and I'll have to keep looking, I'm sure it's saying that this is not a feeling, it's something else, but grief at the federal government that we used to know and rely on. And then this, this idea of open science. And I came from industry and came to this world and was, so pleased that no one talks about, the, commercial aspects of all this. And to see this group thinking through like, okay, how do we monetize this? What is our strategy for this? It's reality, but it is a moment of grief. But thank you, Ruth, for reminding us that that next step is action.
Well, I feel incredibly powerful and optimistic with all of you and us together. I mean, our abilities, our capabilities are just astonishing. And I'm feeling that way right now when we're together, and let's stick together.
Thank you for that. All right. We're at the end of our time. Thank you so much for making this work. I've been like all week kind of imagine like, okay, how's this going to go? What do I do? And you never know. And you made it great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, all the online people. We love you. And see you at the plenary.